Hi, Photo One. Our next unit is about color and using color in photography. So, we're going to talk about some ways that artists use color within their work and why, and look at several examples throughout history. So, photography is a relatively recent art form, color photography, even less so. And color itself is one of the most expressive elements of art. It has been used throughout art history for as long as man has been making art. But color photography is pretty recent. So, what are some ways that artists use color? Artists can use color to be descriptive. They can show things as they really are using color in ways that black and white photography does not. Color can be used to express an idea. It can be used symbolically, either to tell a story or to represent a symbol or symbolism, which varies depending on cultures. So, for example, weddings in Eastern cultures are represented through like red, being like a power symbol or color, and then weddings in Western tradition are more represented through white. Just like the opposite is true for funerals. In Western cultures, funerals are represented through black. In Eastern cultures, it's white. So, color meanings and symbolism varies depending on the culture. So, one person looking at a work of art could get a completely different meaning from it than somebody else. And that's what makes color so expressive and so fun to learn about. Color can also be used aesthetically. So artists can use color in order to um, intelligently make you feel an emotion or evoke a mood based on maybe its placement in the color wheel, or use it to create a interesting contrast of colors, such as green versus red being complementary colors. Or using all different shades of yellow to make someone feel uncomfortable, maybe because yellow is a very like high frequency vibrating color. Or someone could use all blues or all cool colors to make you feel calm, or again using complements to make make each color stand out better. So there's all different reasons to use color within your work. Artists have been doing so for thousands of years, but in photography, color has always kind of been the holy grail. So for this project, you could think about the color wheel and each color's position on it, whether you want to create, harmony through colors being similar, like maybe you photograph all different things that are blue in one scene, or maybe you want to create contrast between like a red and a green flower. So you can use the color wheel to create color schemes in your work or to inform your color choices. Now, this is an example of the first color photograph. So this was an autochrome photograph um, back in 1907, when photography was first invented in the 1800s. The excitement and the wonder surrounding this new medium was kind of tempered by the disappointment in it not being able to capture and represent color realistically. If an artist wanted their photo to have color, they would have to take oil paint and paint it in. So it wasn't until the Lumiere brothers in France discovered that they could use potato starches that were dyed on their plates in order to print color. So up until then, it was kind of color was like the holy grail of photography. It was this myth that maybe we could make color someday, and that was only 120 years ago. So if you can imagine what it felt like to live in a world where there was no color photography, and then how exciting it was to finally see it. I just think about my grandmother's experience and how when she was a child, color photography was new because it wasn't really popularized, even though it was invented in 1907. It wasn't really accessible to the common person until more of the 1920s or the 1930s, and then even not totally accessible until further experiments were done in the 1950s. So relatively recent within all of like my aunts and uncles and parents' lifetimes was color photography really getting onto the scene. So this is the first color photograph of a woman named Christina on a beach, and this one was created in France. Harry Callahan was another innovator of color photography. He really had his start in the 1950s and worked through like the 1970s. He lived in Chicago. He worked for several different universities throughout his life, and he was very well known for his street photography. So he was very prolific. He would go out on the town and take several rolls of film a day. So in his estate, they found over 100,000 negatives, but he would only print several large enlargements per year. So even though he was very prolific and had a lot of imagery to choose from, he would only print his absolute favorites. And he did a lot of his wife Eleanor, a lot of double exposures where he would take a roll of film and then he would reload it in the camera and take the roll of film again and have all these accidental overlays and overlaps of different double exposures that were all very experimental at the time. In the 1950s, this had not really been experimented with before. And he also did a lot of experiments with color chemistry and invented a lot of the processes that we still use to this day that make it more accessible and easy for people to use color photography. Here's a quote by him: "I wish more people felt that photography was an adventure, the same as life itself, and felt that their individual feelings were worth expressing. Color is a fantastic way to express your feelings, to evoke emotion in your viewer. Depending on what cultures we're from, colors represent, like I said, different emotions, but just psychologically, reds and yellows and oranges tend to make us more energetic and have more energy just because of how our human nature works and how our eyes read that color. And then cool colors like blues and purples and greens, again, tend to be very calming and help to soothe you to sleep. So they recommend painting bedrooms those colors and things. So being aware of colors and what they symbolize can be very helpful in your art for expressing ideas without words, which makes color one of the most expressive elements of art. And then to him, this is what made photography exciting. Gordon Parks was one of the one of the greatest civil rights photographers of all time. He had a very long career from like the 1930s all the way up until his death in 2006. And he was very instrumental during the civil rights movement of bringing about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So his photographs were very influential. He lived with a family named the Thorntons in Jim Crow South in the 1950s, and he just followed them around with his camera every day, documenting these, everyday scenes. And there was often this very seedy underbelly of racism that he photographed and was able to capture with these very intimate, scenes of family life and what it was like to be a Black family living in the Jim Crow South at the time. So there's an image here called Outside Looking In, and it would not read nearly as well if it were in black and white, because you wouldn't really be able to see the contrast of the colors in the distance, showing that they're being excluded from this fun time, this carnival in the distance. So color definitely played a role in his work. He invented the photo essay, which was a series of photographs published in a magazine that told a story without words. So when he took this segregation story, is what it was called, and published it in Life magazine, it kind of changed the field and the discussion around segregation in the South, and really helped to bring about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So another example of how photography can change the world. Here's one of the most influential environmental photos of all time. Kind of like the pale blue dot, you see the Earth for the first time from the moon on Apollo 8. And William Anders took this photograph that has been called the most influential environmental photo of all times, because the whole world, as we're going through the Cold War in the 1970s, and there were a lot of grief and strife between different factions, and all these things divided us. We were all able to look at the Earth, or humanity was able to look back at itself for the first time and see that we're all connected on this little blue dot. So it really kind of gave everyone an existential crisis at the same time, to think, this is it, this is all we have. And the blue is really what showcased how precious the Earth is, what differentiates it from other planets, the fact that it has water, that it has life, made it a very environmental statement. Here we have 3 different portraits. And if you kind of look close, you can see some things that they might have in common, such as contrasting colors. So again, using color, symbolically to symbolize, blue symbolizing water, red having a very dynamic symbolism. It can be very, very positive, like love and passion, or very, very negative, like hate and fire, and um, anger, that kind of thing. So color can be used symbolically. It can be used to tell a story, such as in the image on the right by Sandy Skoglund, Revenge of the Goldfish. It kind of shows the scene where the people themselves are kind of being overwhelmed by this overtaking of the goldfish, getting their revenge, and like they're submerged in their um, fishbowl. And it's almost like waking up in a nightmare. So a lot of her scenes were very dreamlike, also nightmarish, just depending on how you interpret it. Because usually the animals seem to be doing much better off in these imagined worlds than the people that inhabit them. Um, so Sandy Skoglund relied heavily on color contrast to help tell her stories. Cindy Sherman was a feminist photographer that really got her start in the 1970s during the feminist movement, and she would use herself as her own model. You are your most available model, I always say. And she would disguise herself. She started this habit in college because she had a very difficult upbringing, and she found healing and dressing herself up in disguises and in makeup, and using theater and acting to kind of get her outside of her own head, and put on these disguises to become other people and other figures. So she decided her boyfriend at the time told her that she should probably be documenting this process. So she started taking photographs, and that's what got her started. Um, since the 70s, she's still working to this day. Her work has evolved and now almost kind of pokes fun at the rituals that we undergo each day, like the makeup and the hair and all the different like rituals that women especially have to go through to get ready to present themselves to the world each day. So she really exaggerates that here with color, very clashing colors, very dramatic, very bold colors, and also some symbolism in there is this kimono that she's wearing and connecting to like Eastern cultures. And we also have the wig of like and the makeup of a clown, again, kind of calling into question these rituals that we go through. And then the image on the left uses contrast of color to make the Afghan girl stand out. I know we looked at this image during our portrait unit, but it's one of the greatest portraits in photography because of its color, its use of color to really make the drama of this scene stand out. And her eyes, her green eyes, just really draw you in and help to make you care about her story and what's going on behind the scenes, and the suffering that people are going through all around the world. Here's another example from Cindy Skoglund called Radioactive Cats. And this is sort of a scene from like a post-apocalyptic rendering of a world that's maybe post-nuclear, and it looks like the animals are doing much better than humans because they've adapted to be green. In some ways, shape, or form, animals have fared better than humans in this imagined dystopian future where the humans look like they don't really have much food. This drab gray background kind of implies unhealthiness, or just not being in a world that we would want to live in. So it's kind of again giving like a cautionary tale of what could come if humans aren't careful with this power that we have over the planet. And it kind of reminds me of what happened in Chernobyl, where humans have been kind of wiped out from Chernobyl because of the huge radioactive meltdown of the nuclear plant, and animals have come back into that area. So now Chernobyl is almost a wildlife refuge because the animals have adapted to survive the radioactivity where humans have not. So it kind of is a tale from the 1980s is when this photo was taken of some of that nuclear proliferation and some fears that the artist had about the possible futures that could lead to. This is a Japanese artist, Miwa Yanagi, and this is from her series Elevator Girl. And from 1998, her images always involve a lot of color, some symbolism that kind of relates back to like sort of these what it's like to live in maybe a capitalistic society that sort of relegates all of us down to just kind of like clones of one another in a way. So a lot of these women that she incorporates look like just mass-produced Barbie dolls. They're kind of in rigid poses. That kind of shows the restrictions on Japanese women at the time in that culture of what careers were available to them. So red represents a color in Japanese culture of power, of status. So it's kind of this interplay between color symbolism and what was actually going on at the time. So color was very important in Japanese culture. It's even, the color of the sun on the Japanese flag, and it represents status. It represents those in power. So it's kind of poking fun at that with these girls that kind of look like flight attendants or stewardesses or like the elevator girl, that pushes the buttons on the elevator, kind of these menial tasks that, were deemed as women's work or whatever. And it kind of questions that by dressing them in this power color of red. So this interesting interplay of social roles, and they also look like they're in these, most of her work as these big scenes of, almost feeling kind of trapped in almost a sci-fi type future, or like parking garages and mall complexes and that kind of thing. This is another Japanese artist, Miwa Ninagawa, and she likes to produce images that she calls girlish or pretty. And she does a lot of with color, with a variety of colors, overlaying, overlapping, floral arrangements. And I just love, showing her work as an example of where all you can find color, whether it be a variety of colors in like a supermarket, photographing the produce counter, or different shelves at different stores. Even if you go down Walmart aisles, you can find a lot of colors, and maybe the candle aisle. I don't know, just bring your phone and your camera wherever you are, and be on the lookout for color all around you. So she tried to produce images that were deemed pretty, was kind of her goal, capturing beauty. Nicholas Murray is a photographer that actually had a relationship with Frida Kahlo for about 10 years during her marriage to her husband, Diego Rivera. And this photographer was able to capture Frida in some very like everyday, intimate moments of her kind of letting her hair down and being herself, but also showcasing her Mexican heritage with the dresses that she chose, and the outfits and the backgrounds that all kind of represent her personality and her interests, especially her interest in nature. So the green in the background is not by chance. It's a very purposeful choice to help symbolize Frida Kahlo's interest in nature. In a lot of her paintings and her work as well, these themes would be repeated and focused on by the artist in many different ways. So this photographer, Nicholas Murray, got to know Frida, and really a lot of the photographs we still have of her to this day are his, and are because of this close relationship that they shared. So green, in this case, symbolizing nature. You can choose background colors of whatever you would like to be able to express different things about the personality of the subject in front of them. Dean Chamberlain is a light painter. He's a photographer that revolutionized this field in the 1980s of night painting. So he would use all dark scenes, and he would use different colored flashlights to paint the scene, to make his figures stand out. And these were, he did a whole series of innovators in the psychedelic movement, where they were trying to develop different psychedelic drugs and study their effects on people. So this was a movement in the 70s and 80s that was, kind of in the limelight for different, controversial reasons. And he was photographing these scientists within their homes in sort of psychedelic ways, with lots of different lights and different effects, and painting with light. Some of his exposures would take up to 8 hours because of how dark the scene was and how many different colored lights he was painting with in order to reveal the place where these figures in history lived. And then finally, Annie Leibovitz is a photographer, a celebrity photographer who got her start for the Rolling Stones magazine, and worked in many different fashion magazines, including Vogue. She did a whole series for Disney called The Year of a Million Dreams campaign, where she was photographing different celebrities dressed up as figures from movies, from fairy tales, princesses, heroines, that kind of thing. So here on the right, we have Kirsten Dunst dressed as Marie Antoinette from, that movie that she starred in. And she's dressed in purple. So the color purple, what does that represent? Um, Typically, it represents royalty or the upper class, because it was so expensive back in the day. We don't think about this because all colors, sort of like clothing, cost the same. But back in, several hundred years ago, it would be very, very expensive to buy pigment that was purple, or to buy gowns or dresses that had purple pigment in it, because the purple was from conch shells, and you'd have to have several hundred conch shells, seashells, to be able to make one garment in this color. So it was reserved just for royalty, just for the upper class, and it kind of separated them from the rest. And if you know the story of Marie Antoinette, it kind of ends in tragedy. And with that, um, infamous statement, "Let them eat cake," which she didn't actually say, but it was rumored to have, been her attitude at the time. And so the people kind of turned on the upper class in that story. So the purple is very important in signifying that separation of the classes. And then the blue dress in Alice in Wonderland, you can see over here on the left, this is an image called Drink Me, by Annie Leibovitz, where she did a whole series of based on the story Alice in Wonderland. So here, blue kind of helps tells that story. Kind of like how in fashion, the little black dress represents elegance and refinement. A little blue dress, and like a little girl, can represent childhood. It can also represent power. It's a very corporate color. A lot of corporate logos are made with blue. So in that way, it can communicate the power that young women still have, and have to this day. So be very purposeful with your use of color. Think about how and why artists might use color, and have a lot of fun exploring what you want to express with the colors that you use in your project. Thank you.